All right. Well, welcome to our April Cybersecurity Meetup. I'm Luis Alvarez, President and CEO of Alvarez Technology Group, and I am here with Jeff Dicks, our Chief Security Officer. And the meetup is just a forum. We take about half an hour of your time to talk about topics of interest around cybersecurity, give you some updates on anything that's out there that's important for you to know about. But today's meetup is really going to be about your digital exhaust. It's cyber spring cleaning time. So, yeah, exactly. So, Jeff, I don't know about you, but I just started hearing this phrase digital exhaust. I don't know if it's now something that's, another little tech phrase that we like to use, but, it is a real thing.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty recent, though. I just started seeing it out there in sort of the circles that I run in. They've been talking about it, and it is, cybersecurity related. It's important to kind of keep our cyber hygiene as clean as possible on our systems, because it could potentially information that can be gained by a threat actor can be used if we're not careful with how we handle and manage our personal data on our systems.
Yeah, and we have some tips for you on how you can do that. That'll be coming up shortly. But first, as always, we wanted to provide some highlights of things that are of interest. These are actual active alerts that are on the ISOs out there. These are information sharing associations and organizations where we subscribe to them to keep up with the barrage of things that happen every day. And two of them that are notable is one, this French hospital group up in northern France, 6,000 employees, multiple locations, got hit with a ransomware attack. About 26 gigabytes of information was stolen. And they were so desperate because the attacks just kept on coming and the data was being exfiltrated, that they actually disconnected all of their facilities from the internet, which is, quite frankly, something I've never heard of. So it's a pretty desperate move.
Yeah, Louis, we used to joke, if you want your system to be safe and secure, first thing you do is disconnect it from the internet. But that used to be a joke, but now it's like actually really happening. Companies that are getting attacked and they want to stop the attack, they pretty much can just disconnect from the internet. Of course, there's a lot of implications as far as their ability to function without the internet. But it's certainly one way to protect yourself is not be on the internet.
Yeah, and to your point, it's so difficult to imagine life in any business, especially a healthcare provider, where you need to access so many online services, and disconnecting from the internet is a pretty, drastic move, which is one of the reasons that it's so important to implement and regularly update your cybersecurity systems, whatever products and services and different things that you're doing to protect yourself using layered cybersecurity. You got to stay on top of those things and make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can to prevent yourself from becoming a victim. And speaking of victims, a lot of us, when we think of cybersecurity, we think in terms of online presence and why we disconnect from the internet. But there's also something called vishing, which is becoming more and more prevalent. And that is, cyber criminals calling you to try to get you to do something using social engineering to get you to give them login credentials or to, alter your behavior where you're less likely to be, on alert. And they're a group of criminals that are targeting credit unions using vishing, where they make a phone call and pretend to be somebody from a company that they know does business with that particular credit union, to get them to reveal credentials. Hey, I forgot my password. Could you reset it for me and tell me what it is? That sort of thing. And unfortunately, people still fall prey to that because they're trying to be, good and provide good customer service. But sometimes it's better to be cautious. And what are some of the things you think people can do to prevent themselves from being victimized, Jeff?
Well, I think probably one of the most important things that we're stressing and emphasizing these days is to make sure organizations are doing at least annual cybersecurity awareness training for their end users to kind of instill a suspicion, a level of suspicion when they're dealing with phone calls or their emails they may be receiving that may have links in them that link to bad malicious locations, things like that. So I think the number one thing is to raise awareness of your end users in your organization about these different types of threats, and not just do it once, but do it at least on an annual basis, if not more frequently.
Yeah, that's why I like the platform that we use for our clients, because it not only has the annual training, which, by the way, I took earlier this year and passed with 100%.
Good for you.
But we send out a weekly newsletter with these micro trainings on there, and the micro trainings are very topical. They're things that are happening in real time. So you can take a test in January, but by June, the tactics and the methods the bad guys have used to get you to compromise something, it's changing and it's altering. So it's nice to have these little micro trainings that talk about those things, and they're about 2 to 3 minutes long. They're fun to do. You get a little 4-question test at the end, and it gamifies it. I know in our organization, I'm nowhere near the top score because I don't do enough of the micro trainings. But some of the guys are really into trying to be the top person. In fact, it's kind of funny. I got to share with you that one of our clients took a micro quiz and they disagreed vehemently with the fact that they missed a question, and so they reached out to us and said, "Hey, I want that
point
micro quiz to I want my points because I can prove to you that
Wow.
I'm right." So that's somebody that's really, really interested in not losing. So
yeah, and
so
it keeps
these
cybersecurity awareness top of mind for everyone. So it's not just that annual training they do; they get reminded, not too often, but regularly enough to keep it top of mind.
Yep, definitely. So let's go to the topic at hand here, and that is why there's a need for cyber cleaning. And the reality is that we are pretty sloppy as individuals, not necessarily at work, but at home when it comes to protecting ourselves and our families. And here when I think this part of the presentation is really geared to you as a user, not necessarily as an employee of an organization and what you need to do to protect yourself there, but really what you need to do to protect yourself individually and your family. For example, 70% of people use the same password for multiple accounts, which means that once that account is hacked, then it's really easy to test that. They have cyber criminals have automated systems that will take a password and an email address and test that across thousands of online sites to try to see how many of those sites they can get into. So we'll talk a little bit in a minute or two about what you can do to protect yourself there. But 23% of people don't use anti-malware, and that means that they're not using anything on their PC to protect themselves.
Wow, that's surprising.
Which is, that's mind-boggling to me, because if you're running a Windows PC, it comes with Windows Defender, which is pretty good for home users. They've made great strides.
It's gotten a lot better, definitely.
And that's free, so you should have that enabled, and you should be using it, keeping it up to date, which is another issue. Even if you have anti-malware installed, keeping it up to date is equally as important. You want to make sure that those patches are installed automatically and regularly, because whenever there's a threat out there, these anti-malware companies will issue these patches as soon as they have them available, and you don't want to disable automatic updates and miss out on some of those patches that will make you vulnerable. And 55% of people don't have any ID theft protection. And here what we're talking about is a way for you to know if your identity has been compromised. Just like a lot of us have services that monitor our credit score, and we want to make sure that if something happens there, we're aware that maybe somebody's doing something. You need to have a method for also making sure that if your credentials are compromised on the dark web, where they're sold and exchanged, that you are alerted to that, so that you need to change those credentials. And most of us aren't doing anything, which is surprising given the number of breaches that involve so many people. These whenever you hear of a breach that involves a large group of people, that organization is responsible for providing free identity theft management and protection for a period of time. I know I've gotten a couple of letters over the course of the last year from various places that have been hit, just saying, out of an abundance of caution, we're providing you with free identity theft protection. So, you ever gotten one of those letters?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was a part of the Anthem breach a few years ago, and after that experience, I use LifeLock. There's several different options for people to go to have that ID theft protection. But I like LifeLock. It was bought by Symantec a few years ago, and it provides alerts when transactions over $500 are occurring on my accounts. It monitors a lot. It's really, really good protection, but that's just a personal preference. Hey, going back to passwords, another thing I wanted to mention during the webinar is that I use a password manager to manage my passwords so that I don't have to use the same credentials on all my websites. And what a password manager does for you is it allows you to create unique and complex passwords or phrases and store them in a database. And then as you're browsing around to the different sites that you use, the password manager will actually recognize what site you're on and actually put those credentials in for you. And so that you can access whatever you happen to be accessing. So password manager is a good solution if you're one of those many people, 70%, that use the same username and password across multiple portals.
We'll talk a little bit more about that, because that leads us right to our first tip. Strengthen your login credentials. Most of us try to remember our passwords, so we want to use something simple that we're going to remember, because our brains aren't what they used to be. We're being flooded with information, so we need to try to protect ourselves. But it's important that you use longer and stronger passwords, a minimum of 12 characters. There was a chart that I was going to show here, but I actually can't find it. But it's a really interesting chart and shows how quickly you can break simple passwords. Like, it just takes seconds, minutes. But once you get to 12 characters, it takes longer. And when we talk about breaking passwords, these are very fast computers that can go through any number of algorithms to try to guess what passwords look like, and then try to apply those. And the shorter it is, the easier it is to hack. One other recommendation is, rather than using a password, consider using a passphrase. And the difference is, a passphrase is something that you can easily remember. So you can say something like, my daughter's name is Lee, and then you include some capital letters, and you substitute some of the other letters for special characters, and suddenly you have a very secure password that you can easily remember. So passphrases are becoming very popular.
Yeah, absolutely, Louis. And the Center for Internet Security, which is a organization that makes cybersecurity recommendations to organizations throughout the country, they're actually recommending now for their minimum password length is 16 characters, which is 4 above what 12 is better than 8, but 16 is better than 12. But when you get to 16, you really need some sort of a passphrase to be able to remember that many characters. So I think definitely the industry is going towards passphrases, and we're encouraging all our customers to use passphrases instead of passwords.
Yeah, MFA if possible. Multi-factor authentication is for I'm sure most of us know what it is by now, because we're probably all using it for one account or more. But all of your online sites that you visit that have MFA available, you should use. So, for example, even if it's a social media site like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, all of those offer MFA as an option. And one of the things about social media that I'll point out, we'll talk a little bit more about social media in a second, but we get approached many times by folks that their social media account has been hacked and compromised and taken over by somebody. And they ask us, well, what can I do to get it back? And the answer is nothing. Once somebody has stolen your social media account, it's really easy to do. They get in there, they guess your password, they then change that password. Now they can get into it and you can't. Those sites don't care. Facebook is not going to do anything to try to block that site or try to get it back to you, because it's just, there's so many billions of accounts that they have to deal with. They can't manage, how do you prove that it really belongs to you and not the people that are currently, using it? So if you have MFA, that makes it really difficult, if not impossible, for something like that to happen. And once your social media site is compromised, they have access to all of your contacts. They have access to your history. It becomes a real big giant mess, and it can really impact a lot of relationships. I've seen it actually cause some friendships to fracture because of some of the stuff that was in that social media account in private. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Louis, I have a lot of customers that ask me about multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication can be pushed out in many different areas, and people sometimes don't know where to start. I always recommend that they start with their email accounts, because we still see a lot of what's called business email compromises, where somebody's taken over somebody's email account and are sending mail as other people. Certainly, as you mentioned, the social media accounts is a good idea. All of the social media providers do offer that as an option to be turned on to protect those accounts. And then after those two areas, then we also like to see it in remote VPN connections. So if you're working from home and connecting to the office, multi-factor authentication is very good in preventing somebody unauthorized from accessing an organization's network remotely. So
yep.
If people have questions out there about that, that's where to get started with your email, social media accounts, and then encourage your employers, your organizations to use MFA on their remote VPN connections.
Yeah, and then the last thing is something Jeff already talked about, is use a password manager. Not only is it good for storing passwords, but the more sophisticated password managers will actually create complex passwords for you that you don't have to remember. So you can say, hey, create a 20 or 20, a 30 character long password of things that I would never remember, but I don't need to, because my password manager is going to remember it for me. So that's another valuable reason to use a password manager.
Yep. Some people get concerned that what happens if I don't have access to my password manager. Most portals and applications have a way to reset your password. So it's less of a concern, because you can always hit that reset my password link and get back into your account if you don't have access to your password manager. Password managers can be a local information store on your system, or it could be in the cloud. I haven't heard or experienced an issue with not being able to access my particular password manager that I use, but it could happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You can always reset your password. All right, tip number 2, clean your machine. So here what we're talking about is, we accumulate a lot of flotsam throughout our year, things that we download, things we want to take a look at. And over the years, they start to accumulate. So it really impacts not just the fact that you have all of this information that you don't really need or use anymore, but also the performance of your system. So by cleaning those things up, getting rid of old pictures that you don't need. One of the things about digital picture taking, right, is that you can take 1 million pictures. You don't have to develop them anymore. Us old fogies remember when you were real careful about the pictures that you took, because it was going to cost you money to get that print done. Doesn't matter anymore. So now we take a bazillion pictures and we just let them sit on our smartphones and on our PCs, and it's good to go in there and just get rid of some of this stuff.
Yeah, remember the days when you had you had a roll of film with 36 pictures. You take it to get developed, and none of them came out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you paid for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Now not everybody knows how old we are.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, too bad. Hey, I hear film is coming back for some photographers. Like, let's hope it's true. Um, one tool that you can use, it's free. There is a free version of it up there. It's called CC Cleaner. And this does a good job of cleaning out temporary files and cookies and all those things that get downloaded to your PC as you travel, the highways and byways of the internet. And if you don't clean them out, they just sit there and can continue to send information to whoever dropped those cookies into your PC. You may not want that to be happening, but it also, again, is a good way to improve the performance of your system, because those temporary files start to get bloated. Those folders get so bloated. There's sometimes gigabytes of things that you no longer need, and it's best to just get rid of them and start from scratch.
Yeah, it helps your system stay lean and mean. I use that actually. We didn't coordinate this ahead of time, but I use that every day. It runs a scan in the mornings and cleans out cookies, temporary files, and unneeded files, and it keeps my system running, at its optimum. My system doesn't slow down over time because I use CC Cleaner. So I highly recommend it. We don't get a commission on it, but it's a good practice and a very good tool.
Yep. Eliminate unused apps. Most people have around 80 apps on their smartphone, but use less than 10 a day. Over time, we start to download apps because somebody recommended it to us, or, I need it for this specific thing right now. And then you don't get rid of it. And what people don't understand is that these apps collect personal information, even if they're not used. So they sit there, not necessarily dormant on your PC, but they're updated and they're, all this happens in the background, and they're collecting information on the usage that you do. Sometimes we think that Alexa or Siri is listening to us because we talk to our spouse about, hey, I think I need a new tent. And next thing you know, on your PC, you start to see tents popping up. But the reality is, it's not because you talk next to Alexa. Frankly, Alexa could care less what we say. It's more because you were maybe using an app on your phone and you looked for a tent, or you were on social media and you were talking to a friend about tents, or you posted a picture of a tent. And all of a sudden, these marketing algorithms that are out there are so powerful that they can, collate all of this information and provide data to manufacturers and vendors to say, hey, Jeff might be somebody that's looking for a tent, so why don't you send some tent ads? So
that's the last thing I need. More tents. I have plenty of tents.
You got a lot of tents, yeah. But really, it's good practice to go in there and just get rid of all these old apps that you're not using, or even applications on your PC that you're not using. And don't forget to check on your kids. They do the same thing. They download a bunch of stuff, and your kids are being tracked all the time. So, do yourself a favor and get rid of those unused apps. Tip number 4, review your online accounts. We don't just spend time on social media online. We spend time on, e-commerce sites that we buy things from once or twice, or blogs that we subscribe to, and newsletters that we subscribe to. And those things are, they too are used to track you and track what you're doing online. So the fewer of those that you have, the less exposed you are. So if you're not, if you subscribe to a newsletter years ago and you're not really reading it, all you do is delete it when it hits your inbox, or you maybe set up an auto delete function to get rid of it. It's time to unsubscribe from that newsletter. You don't need it. It's time to unsubscribe from that blog that you don't look at.
But I might look at it sometime in the future, like next year or something. So I've got to keep it on, Louis.
Exactly. Yeah. Subscribe again.
Okay.
Get rid of any social media platforms you don't use. If you had a MySpace account back in the day, or an AOL account, or a Yahoo account, and you don't use it anymore, just because you stop using it doesn't mean it's gone away. It's sitting there. So just go online and get rid of it. If you decide that you want to start playing on MySpace again, we'll have at it. But for the most part,
MySpace is coming back. I'm certain of it. I still got my account.
And while you're on your social media accounts, my friends, review what you posted. Many of us have been on social media for, over a decade, if not longer. And so, what you might have posted when you were 18 or 19 or 20, in college, might not be appropriate now that you're looking to get a job. Because I'll tell you, as an employer, although in many states it's considered illegal, people do it. They go online and they look at the social media sites that they can see of potential employees, just to see what kind of character they're hiring. One thing you should do too is make your social media sites private to just the people that you connect with. Don't leave it open to the public, because then your potential employers, potential school administrators, if you apply to colleges, because colleges do have social media research groups that is part of the process. They can get in there and make judgments on the person that you might have been when you were in your teens or in your 20s, but not who you are now in your 30s and 40s. So it's good practice to go in there and just clean that stuff out. If you want people to judge you for who you are today and not who you were then.
Yeah, Louis, an additional benefit of making your social media a little more tighter circle to just people is that the number one source for threat actors to send their phishing emails to people is LinkedIn. So if your LinkedIn is completely open to everybody in the world, threat actors can get that information. They can find out what company you work at, probably what your email address is. They can get enough information about you to target those phishing emails directly to people that they find on LinkedIn. Number one source.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap up here quickly because we promised you that this is a 30-minute thing. So a couple additional tips that are kind of no-brainers. Update all your systems. 58% of breaches are caused because of missing operating system or app patches. So make sure you're updating. You have your PC set to auto update. Your iOS system set to auto update. Your phone set to auto update. And that apps are getting updated as well. Don't just ignore the fact that you might have an old Windows Office suite that you haven't updated in a while. Those need to be updated as well as the operating system. Back up your systems. If you don't have an auto backup set up, take this opportunity, once a year to go in there and back up all of the important files that you have. So that way, God forbid that you get hit with ransomware, at least you have all of that data that you've accumulated, and you're not forced to pay ransom because you want to see those baby pictures that you took of your kids back in the day, and there's nowhere else that you have them except on that PC. And those are precious memories. I understand that you want to keep them, but if you have it backed up, then you can just tell that that cyber criminal to go pound sand because you're not interested in paying the ransom.
Yeah, and you might have some important work files on those systems as well.
Yeah. And final tip is it's now a good time to go around and find all of those old devices that you have in drawers and in.
I have one right here. I have all right here in my drawer. Seriously.
And safely dispose of them. But we say safely because like 40% of those secondhand devices, old phones, old PCs, old tablets, they contain personal identifiable information, PII. And you just don't want to take it to get e-wasted without, somehow deleting or removing all that information. Because if somebody, comes in behind you and after you've dumped your e-waste over at the garbage dump and they say, oh, this looks interesting, let me take this, and they figure out a way to get into it, then they have access to that. So make sure that before you dispose of these devices, you reset them, if it's a phone or tablet, back to the default settings. That'll wipe out everything. Some PCs as well have the option to wipe everything out and get it back to where there's no data on there that's extractable. But don't just throw them into the garbage or into e-waste, or donate them to somebody without making sure that all that data is removed.
Good tip.
So with that, I want to tell you that next meetup in May, we are going to talk about cyber insurance requirements. The cyber insurance industry is changing at a rapid clip. We are starting to see some applications coming through our clients that require significantly more cyber protections than we saw last year at multiple levels of the organization. A lot more documentation, a lot more reasons to basically decline giving you coverage. So it's important that we cover this subject, and we'll have a guest speaker with us next month to talk about the latest and greatest things going on in cyber insurance. So Jeff, any final thoughts before we close out today?
No, I think next month's topic is awesome. Definitely a lot happening in that space. A lot of insurance companies have been losing money because of all the claims they're paying on ransomware. So very current and appropriate topic for today. Just wanted to thank everybody for attending, and hopefully you find this information valuable. Please give us some feedback if you can, and we'll continue to have them on a monthly basis. But thanks again for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you all. And the recording will be made available within a couple days. So you'll be getting a notification for those of you that attended, as well as the people that registered but weren't able to attend. They'll also get a link to the recording. So with that, take care, and we'll see you after Cinco de Mayo.
Adios.
Adios.